Okay, now we're going to continue in chapter 4. I'm going to do exercise 4-8, or let's say, no, 4-9. Identify at least 3 factors that can cause inaccuracies or a distortion of reports in the news media. So, okay, what causes inaccuracies or distortions? Well, number one is that you can get distortions because the news agency or the media you're watching is biased. They have an agenda. So today, you have different media organizations. Some are left-leaning, more liberal, and some are more conservative. Like Fox News, for example, is on the more right. So if you watch most if you watch news programs, some are going to be on the left, some on the right, so they're going to be biased. They have an agenda. That's one thing. Okay, another thing is that will cause inaccuracies is that some of these news organizations don't have enough money to pursue the story in any depth. So they basically just rely on first impressions, without checking stories out. So that's another thing. They don't have the money. Another thing could be they're manipulated by since they don't have a lot of money. The government will often give them money to show programs that are basically produced by the government or the military. So uh, they'll present those type of programs. That's obviously going to be a distorted source. Okay, so that's 3. But basically, and when it comes to when it comes to reporting on U.S. foreign policy and what the United States is doing and so on, I asked you to watch this documentary this week on Noam Chomsky, and he'll give you the details on that kind of stuff. Basically, I think when it comes to on reporting about what is happening in this country on a big scale, and in the foreign policy, I think it's very important. And with corporations, it's very important to realize that the news media, all the stations in this country, except some privately owned ones, they're all owned by big corporations. So when you listen to ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox News, these are owned by billionaire corporations, and obviously they all have an agenda. And so you're not going to ever get on TV. You're not going to get critical, true, honest reports of what the corporations are doing, and you're also not going to get honest reports about what the U.S. is doing, U.S. foreign policy, because all the big corporations, they all support it. So watch the Chomsky documentary. It's which I assigned this week. Manufacturing Consent. It's about 2 hours. And so watch that. I mean, that's great. That'll give you a lot of insight into what's going on in the media that you're not going to get in this book. There's a lot of good stuff on YouTube. At this point, let me just say something. I'll give you some names. I mean, you can check this up on YouTube. I'll give you. I'm not going to assign this stuff, but Richard Feynman, for example. Richard Feynman is one of the greatest, probably the greatest American physicist in the last part of the 20th century. So if you want to know how science works and the difference between science and pseudoscience, if you want to know how scientists evaluate, evidence, go to YouTube and type in Richard Feynman, I think, scientific method. That'll bring it's a lecture he gave. It's very popular. Scientific method. It's a very popular lecture that he gave at Caltech. It's brilliant. Okay, so I would really recommend this. I'm not assigning it, but I would recommend it. Richard Feynman, scientific method. Another person that you might want to check out is the amazing Randy. He's a magician. He's been around for years. The amazing Randy, who's a magician, and he debunks a lot of pseudoscience. So if you want to know how he goes about and how scientists go about evaluating claims in science. People claim to have ESP, and they claim to have the ability for dowsing. They have a stick, and they can find out where water is and oil below the ground. There's a lot of claims that people are making. He's been offering, Amazing Randy has been offering for years, $1 million to anyone who can actually prove, with controlled experiment, with people watching, if they can actually prove that they have these special abilities that they claim to have. Mind reading, ability to find water under the ground, things like this. He's offering $1 million for anybody who can prove that. Nobody has won the money yet. That should tell you something. These people that claim to be able to channel spirits and talk to the dead, all this stuff. They can't demonstrate it under controlled conditions. Years ago, there was a person called from Israel. What was his name? He used to be able to bend spoons. Uri Geller. Yeah, he'd go on Johnny Carson and he'd bend spoons. He even went to SRI, Stanford Research Institute in Menlo Park. And he convinced the scientists, that he could actually bend spoons with his mind, The Amazing Randy says something very interesting about that. If you're going to, you might read that in a story. Uri Geller convinced the scientists at SRI, they observed him bend spoons with his mind. Now, how credible is that statement? I mean, how credible is it that because scientists at SRI saw Uri Geller bend a spoon with his mind, how credible is that claim? I mean, should we believe on that basis that Uri Geller really has this power to bend minds? And the answer to that is no. Definitely 100% no. And why is that the case? And the Amazing Randy tells you right off the bat. The reason why is because a professional magician was not present. It's easy to fool scientists. Why? Because scientists are not trained. They're not trained magicians. They can't pick up the tricks. And the reason is because when scientists deal with nature, and nature is not tricking anybody, when you're dealing with people like Uri Geller, you're dealing with a trickster. You're dealing with somebody who is cheating. And scientists are not trained to pick out the cheaters. But professional magicians, they know the tricks. And you cannot trick them. And it's very interesting that when, for example, Uri Geller appeared years ago on the Johnny Carson show, and he'd go on all those other shows and bend spoons, right? So everybody's really convinced, wow, that's really great. When the Amazing Randy was actually present and actually in there with Uri Geller, is it strange that he couldn't do it? His powers left him that night. The reason is because when a professional magician is present, they can pick the trick out. They can see how you're cheating, and so you can't cheat. So anytime anybody makes these extraordinary claims about these abilities they have that seem to be supernatural, I don't believe them. You say, look, if you really have this ability, Amazing Randy will give you $1 million. Just go prove it to him, and he'll check it out. You get $1 million. It's interesting that nobody ever claims that $1 million. So, identify. Okay, how did I get off on that? Identify 3 accurate. Okay. Oh, I don't know how I got off on that, but anyway. Oh yeah. So Richard Feynman, I would go to YouTube and watch his thing on scientific method. I would also go to YouTube and just type in the Amazing Randy, and a whole bunch of stuff will come up. You could pick whatever you're interested in. He's a magician. You could watch some of his magic tricks, and he can, tell you, how what to watch out in other people who claim to have these supernatural abilities. Another person that you might want to check out is Michael Shermer. He's got some good stuff on the internet. Michael Shermer. He's a big name in the skeptical movement. Michael, Shermer, Shermer. Go to YouTube. Check some of his stuff out. He's got some stuff on basically what Chapter 4 is about, credibility, of how to evaluate any claims that people make. the bottom line is you need to look for evidence and consider opposing viewpoints. A long time ago, I gave a lecture where I talked about Queertol, Queertol. Let me repeat this again because you'll probably forget it. So let me go over it every so often. I'll go over it. It's a acronym, and it stands for 7 things that you should pay attention to in evaluating an argument that somebody makes. Q is for qualification. Watch for qualifying words. U is make sure you understand what the person is saying. So write so people can understand you. E stands for provide enough evidence. So when you're evaluating somebody's claim, make sure that they provide enough evidence for you. If they claim to have these supernatural powers, or they claim some really strange story, if they claim that they've been abducted by some UFO, make sure that they provide enough evidence. Don't just take them at their word. The evidence has to be relevant, and make sure it's true. And how do you know it's true? You got to check it out. And this is very important. Consider opposing viewpoints. Listen to people who have, listen to these people. Listen to their opponents. When somebody tells you something, don't just take their word. Listen to other people who are critical of what they're saying. Listen to the objections to what they're saying. You might find that there's pretty good objections to what they're saying, and might warn you from the beginning not to believe them. And make sure they're arguing logically. Qualify your statements, right, so people understand you. Enough evidence, relevant evidence, true evidence. Consider opposing viewpoints, and argue logically. Okay, so that's a repetition of something I did a long time ago. But anyway, if this is not an assignment, but it's a recommendation, or if you have nothing else to do and you want something to do, and you want to have some fun, go to YouTube and check out Richard Feynman, Feynman. He's, again, one of the great American physicists of the 20th century. The Amazing Randy and Michael Shermer. They all have a lot of good stuff to say about critical thinking on YouTube. So they'll give you a lot more information than this book does. This book doesn't, to me, doesn't really get into a lot of the details. That's one reason I did assign Chomsky. Now, the documentary on Noam Chomsky called Manufacturing Consent. And it's a 2-hour documentary. I want everyone to watch that documentary. I put it in the assignment part in Canvas. So make sure you watch, and then do the assignment on it. I gave some assignment on it. That's an excellent. You'll learn a lot more from that documentary, believe me, than you'll learn in basically all of this chapter. Basically, what this chapter is doing, it's all common sense. I mean, that's why this is basically common sense. A lot of it's just common sense. If you don't want to be tricked and you don't want to believe stuff that's not true, check stuff out. That comes to, and it comes to everything. When it comes to science, when it comes to religion, when it comes to claims that people make about conspiracies. In today's society, we are inundated with different theories that people come up with about politics. If you don't personally check the stories out, you really should not. You should just suspend your judgment. The one thing about claims, too, I should really make clear is when you're presented with a claim, it's not an A or it's on a or B. You either have to believe it or reject it. Often the rational thing to do is not to do either. It's simply saying, I don't know. I mean, I suspend judgment. I don't reject it. And I don't accept it. Now, you might say, well, it seems to me it's probably not true, but you don't have to say, I know it's not true. Just say, I'm not convinced. And I'm not just going to believe it or reject it until I check it out, until I'm convinced. That's probably the best attitude in a lot of things. If somebody tells you they've been abducted from you, if I just look, I don't believe it. If you could come and give me the evidence, then I'll look at your evidence. But until you do that, I'm not going to believe it. But anyway, check out Richard Feynman, Amazing Randy, and Michael Shermer on YouTube. Okay, this is all on Chapter 4. I'll do another video on Chapter 4. Okay? Anyway, talk to you later.